Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to what I feel is a very important conversation and topic that we need to have. Is very timely for what we're facing right now in the agricultural space. And we want to make sure that we amplify this message. I am Seneca Edwards Heron of Freedmen Heirs Foundation. I'm the founder and executive director. And I am so excited to have you here with us today. Before we get started with our special guest, I want to make sure I take some time to kind of go through some of the housekeeping. Housekeeping for today is that this webinar is going to be recorded. It is recorded, and we will post it to our YouTube channel. All attendees' cameras are off and microphones are muted, just so that we can make sure that we're hearing the message that our speakers and guests have for us today. Please be aware that the chat and Q&A functions are enabled. So place your questions there. We will make sure to get to your questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So before we move forward, we want to just talk a little bit about who we are as an organization here at Freedmen Heirs. We are a nonprofit organization, and we help and provide support for Black farmers across the United States through access to technical assistance, access to capital, and new market opportunities. We would love to connect with you. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to myself or Patrice. Or you can join our newsletter where you can keep up with what some of the activities that we're doing, some of the collaborations and partnerships that we are involved in, and different ways to connect with us. Additionally, please reach out to us, connect to us through Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. Next slide, please. So today we have special guests from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We have with us Michelle Hughes, who is the co-executive director, and Laura Del Prete, who is the farmer mental health director. Before we hand it off to the National Young Farmers team, I wanted to just provide a brief overview of their bios and the great work that they are doing at the organization. Michelle, she's a former hog farmer from New Haven, Connecticut, who specializes in agricultural policy reform and DEI. She's the co-executive director of the National Young Farmers Coalition. At the coalition, Michelle provides strategic direction and oversight of the organization to meet its mission to shift power and change policy for the next generation of working farmers. Michelle served as a member of USDA's Equity Commission and co-authored a report of 66 recommendations written as guidance to the Secretary of Agriculture that aim to address a legacy of discrimination at USDA. She's a graduate of Haverford College and New York University's Food Studies program. Laura, with over 12 years of experience in nonprofit management, built a career focused on advocating for mental health and community well-being. Before joining the team at the National Young Farmers Coalition as Farmer Mental Health Director, Laura served as Chief Operating Officer at the National Alliance on Mental Illness in New Jersey, where she led the development and execution of operational policies. Now, as Farmer Mental Health Director at National Young Farmers Coalition, Laura is deeply committed to addressing the unique mental health challenges faced by young and beginning farmers. She leads initiatives that raise awareness about mental health in the agricultural community, developing programs that provide resources, education, and support to farmers at risk. Now I will turn this portion of the webinar over to Laura and Michelle.
Thanks, and thank you all for being here. I am just really quickly going to start sharing my slides. I really appreciate that intro, though. Um, let's see if I can make this work.
If you need me to, I have mine queued up.
I think I'm good. Thank you, though, Laura. Okay, let's see. Alrighty. Can you all see the proper screen? Does that work?
There you go.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. Great. So hi everyone, thanks for being here. As it was mentioned, my name is Michelle Hughes. I serve as co-executive director of the National Young Farmers Coalition, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, and also about myself. And Laura will, who is our farm mental health director, will tell you a little bit more about our farm mental health work and the program that we run at Young Farmers to service folks in our network. So, if you're not familiar with the Young Farmers Coalition, we are about a decade and a half old, depending on who you ask. And so we're quite young as an organization as well. And we mostly work on land access, climate, and farmer mental health policy advancements and program implementation. So, we have our hands in a lot of different things, but the focus of our work is really supporting the next generation of agriculture, and that is how we choose our policy platforms and portfolio. So here's a little bit more about the coalition. If words don't work for you, you can just listen to my voice. We were officially formed in 2010, although the coalition started gathering before that at young farmer conferences in a number of different ways. And we sort of serve as the voice for the future of agriculture policy for the next generation. And so what that looks like is our work is three-pronged. So we have a policy program that is pretty healthy, focuses on those three pillars that I mentioned in the beginning. We also have a couple organizing arms of our work. So we have a national curriculum for folks across the country. We also do place-based organizing, which we call field organizing. And the work that Laura does with her team is also considered organizing at Young Farmers through farmer mental health networking and programming support. What you'll see here is just some examples of things that we've accomplished over the past 10 years that we've existed. So we have a lot of policy wins. We are a policy-driven organization. Things like the microloan program that some of you might be familiar with at USDA, the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program, which is part of FODO now. For my Farm Bill nerds on the call, we received the grant for Farsan, which is our farmer mental health work in the Northeast. And we've helped implement a number of programs that have been supportive to farmers straight out of USDA, including the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, the Discrimination Assistance Program, and most recently, the Land Capital and Market Access Program. So we work very heavily on policy with equity as sort of like the guiding North Star for the work that we do. We hold a survey every 5 years alongside the Census of Agriculture that collects data from young farmers across the country. Our last survey reached nearly 10,000 young farmers across the country, and basically they reflect on their realities as farmers, and that helps us develop our policy platform, helps us rethink what kind of services we provide farmers through organizing and farmer mental health, and helps us think about ways to expand our work. This is the mission of Young Farmers. So we shift power and change policy to equitably resource the next generation of working farmers. And our vision, which is very intertwined with our guiding principles and organizational values, is really just a just future for the food system. So one that is free of racial violence, accessible to communities, oriented towards environmental well-being, and concerned with health over profit. These are our guiding principles in more detail. So we really focus on having a coalition that is made up of farmers and ranchers. We have a lot of members in our network who are agricultural supporters, but we really try to make sure that the base of our organizing work is rooted in farmer and ranching communities. We are an intersectional coalition, so our coalition is much more diverse than the general population of young farmers that exist or the general population of farmers in general. Many of you may know that the average age of a farmer is reaching like 58 nationally now. And there are less than one, I think less, I don't know the exact numbers from the last census and if they're still accurate 3 years later at this point, but less than 1% of farmers in the US are Black, as we know. So in our coalition, we have much higher numbers than that. So we have a much more diverse coalition. I already talked through these other ones, so I won't belabor that point. But the last thing I'll say is that we try to stand in solidarity with other movements that are happening. So we get a lot of questions about things that are happening, at the international level about how young farmers, we are a domestic organization to the United States, but we do try to work in partnership with greater solidarity movements that happen globally. So we're a part of a couple global coalitions, but it's not a huge focus of our work. And with everything happening in the US right now, not exactly a driving force for us at the moment. And I'll pass it to Laura to tell you a little bit more about Cultivemos specifically and the farm mental health program.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And if I happen to go too fast, I'm originally from New York, so feel free to raise your hand and tell me to slow it down, and I will, I promise. So I'm new to the Cultivemos team. I started in November, and when I was looking for a new role, I was looking for something that had a focus, a niche focus on mental health and food insecurity and farming, and that's how I came across young farmers. So the purpose of Cultivemos, which means to cultivate, is a future where diverse farming and ranching communities, with us specifically in the Northeast, are connected to accessibility, culturally competent, timely, effective mental health behavior, excuse me, behavioral health care and stress assistance programs. And our mission is really to build that exclusive network of service providers who are dedicated, who have that lens of uh, well-being for agricultural producers, workers, and their families alike. And this is our team. So we have Angel, who is our Cultivemos manager. Their areas of expertise is cohort guidance. You learn about cohorts a little further along, as well as Angel has a focus on accessibility and ensuring accessibility throughout our programs. You have me, Laura. We have my lovely co-ED, Michelle, whose areas of expertise being contract oversight, thankfully, coalition spokesperson, and nonprofit leadership. And then Michi, Michi's area expertise, she works with what we like to call our FAB, which is our Farmer Advisory Board. And she also has a very specific focus in language justice, which is ensuring that our programs are not only available in Spanish, but with a Spanish first lens. If you come to one of our FAB meetings, we have live translation in chat, in your ears. And it's really about extending that lens and making it accessible for all our participants. And here's a little bit about what guides us. Collaboration, there's a lot of cross collaboration. I like to say cross pollination in the Cultivemos program. Um, being farmer and farm worker informed and understanding the difference between the two. Looking for structural change is a huge part of our core values. And then some of our focus, as Michelle said, grants management, cohorts, training. I have a background in training. I love educating and being educated so that you'll learn a little further down. Um, and then we do have our Northeast approach, right? Addressing structural root causes, uh, BIPOC farmers, farm workers, and young farmers. We do a fair amount of regranting, which we'll talk about shortly, and again, training. And then one of my favorite things to do is, as I like to joke, is professionally brag about the beautiful work happening at Young Farmers. So we have 18 cohorts all over the Northeast that are made up of farmers and farm workers who create projects within the community. We have invested just over $300,000 in interpretation and translation services, making sure that the materials that are being produced and provided are accessible to parties that are interested. We've had upwards of 20 trainings to more than 200 Northeast service providers and looking to continue to expand that. And we've had $200,000 in regranting specifically to farmers and farm workers. And then a little bit about our cohorts. So we know that there are 18 cohorts in our under our umbrella, um, connect to and identify areas for collaboration. So training, resource development, analysis of best practices, um, and cohorts may convene service providers within what's called the Del Mar, the Delaware, Maryland geographic area, providing a community of practice such as extension or farm financial advisors, a thematic agricultural area, dairy, vegetables, and then affinity groups. So service providers that have a very specific focus: veterans, farmers of color, young farmers, um, Latinx, all different groups being able to kind of get that wide reach. And then what do cohorts do? So we talked a little bit about this, right? Um, oh, I think this is actually a double slide. So I'm so sorry. I think I redesigned the same slide twice. So thanks for that. Um, all right. So here's a list of our cohorts, and they are amazing. They're different regions, it's covering different projects. We will dig into a little bit about our projects. I'm not going to read out all the cohorts, but you can see we have a nice array covering all different populations across the Northeast. And then some amazing projects. We have Puesa Latina magazine. That cohort, they have created their own magazine. It's available, I believe, in English and Spanish, addressing needs, experiences of Latinas in that cohort and in that region. We have the farm worker cohort, which is teaching folks managing finance. Sometimes that's talking about money is almost as hard as talking about mental health, right? So how important is that to have that access to that? We have disability in ag, where there's a conference where everyone gets together and it's discussed disabilities in agriculture. And we have our QT BIPOC farmer cohort, which focuses on conflict mediation and resources. And that's just like a little taste of some of the projects. Also, just to put in a plug, there, if you are a podcast person, we do have Cultivating Resilience, which is one of the cohorts podcasts, and they interview different farmers from all over. So I highly recommend it. I started listening before I joined Young Farmers team, and it's fabulous. We have our FAB, the Farmers Advisory Board, um, and an amazing group of people. We have 10 farmers or farm workers who come together monthly for community support and then training purposes. One of the new focus for FAB going into 2025 is utilizing members to provide training, uh, feedback on trainings and resources that are being created for farmers and farm workers. Um, we want the FAB, Farmer Advisory Board, to utilize their subject matter expertise as farmers and farm workers to help guide the tools that are being created for their community. Right. And then why is training the FAB important? Um, it's not just about Training the FAB is not just about the resources and training Cultivemos is bringing to them, but it's also giving the farmers empowerment. It's about engaging them in a way where they're bringing Cultivemos and what they're learning, information, resources, trainings, and back into their community. Training shouldn't end when the Zoom call ends, right? And what we're really trying to do with FAB this year is give them that info, those train the trainer opportunities where the Zoom ends, but then they go to their house of worship, they go to their community center, a family meal, and they're able to then continue to cross pollinate those trainings out into their community. Um, and it's about shifting that power dynamic where the FAB, these farmers and farm workers, are not just receivers of resources and trainings, but they are the bearers of knowledge and the subject matter experts in their field, which is farming. And our advisory team is partners that work alongside young farmers to get this work done. And that includes Farm Aid, Vermont Farm First, University of Maine, Migrants Clinician Network, University of Delaware, and Northeast Farmers of Color at Land and Trust. And what they do is they come together, help with designing the program, coordinating, administrating, and then doing an evaluation. They look at it and they say, what's working, what can be better, and what are we really shining at? And then a little bit about our reach. We cover Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts. I'm so glad it's written down. I would never remember all these. New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, West Virginia, and DC. Now, what makes us a little bit different than some of the other providers is they're largely through, or they're the other providers, receivers of FARSAN are through colleges. We're the program that is embedded specifically within a nonprofit. And I assure you, we do see the chat, and we will be sure to answer any questions that pop up in chat towards the end of the presentation. Okay,
Thanks, Laura.
of course.
So these are just some resources that we wanted to share with you all from some of our partners and also that we find really helpful. One thing we really cherish about the Cultivemos program at Young Farmers is that it does really take a holistic approach because we work on structural change in the other parts of our organization as well as farmer mental health. It really creates like this nice intersection of a way to think about farmer mental health that I think is a little bit more robust than you might find in other places or that has historically happened across agriculture. So these are some folks that we think are also doing that work in a very holistic way and can provide more like comprehensive services to farmers outside of just like a phone number to call or a couple buttons to press on the internet. These are really like community-based resources, the way that the FARSAN program is. A couple more here. And I would encourage you, I'm sure you all are watching things disappear from government websites. So if you like anything on this last website, I encourage you to try to download it if you can, in case things get lost. We're watching a lot of resources get pulled right now from government sites, which is terrible, but doesn't mean that you can't have them yourself before that happens. Um, these are just some tips that we wanted to talk about. So, as I mentioned, we work with a lot of different folks, and we've compiled sort of like some things that we find are really helpful to individuals. So, outside of community-based work, of course, we take it very seriously that people do some self-care as well on their own. And these might seem like obvious or straightforward to you as things to think about, but they're actually things that are quite difficult to implement. And so I just want to mention that, like, you might hear people talking about, oh, I meditate every morning, or, like I set boundaries, but it's actually really hard to do those things in real life. Like when you're actually taking care of yourself, or like you're in a conflict with another person, or you feel overstimulated too much during the day or too stressed out, it can really be hard to like interrupt that. These are some ways that you really can try to get ahead and be proactive about your mental health. And I do want to mention that, like, I think people kind of just meditation is becoming like a little bit of a buzzword, and like mindfulness has definitely become that, but it is a practiced skill. Like people spend years and years of their life practicing meditation. It's not something that, you just do for a couple weeks and then you can, but I think it's more effective if it's something that you like really work into your lifestyle. And so we share these as things to think about, but also things to like try to implement for the long term and like become a part of your regular practice of caring for yourself, that we found really helpful to farmers as well. So I just highlighted a few at the top, but some other ones that might be obvious, but I think people overlook are like getting enough rest, engaging in creative expression, even when you're not given the opportunity to do that, right? Like, if you're at Young Farmers, a lot of our farmers are in like press opportunities and advocate opportunities where they might feel like they don't have a lot of creative space. But I think we often underestimate how much autonomy we have to express ourselves creatively or ask for a different path to communicate. That can be really helpful. Um, and I also want to highlight the importance of a 7-minute phone call or like interaction. There have been studies that show that like you don't actually have to spend that much time talking to other people. Like many of us are so busy. We have such busy lives. We have like we're all sort of on our own individual paths, and you have like your immediate, family or chosen family or folks that you're in community with. And you might feel like, oh, I don't have time to call this person or that person that lives halfway across the country. But just talking on the phone with someone for like 10 minutes actually shows that like you can have a really meaningful conversation, even if it's just about one thing. So these are some of the things that we really try to hone in on. Laura, I think, is this you or me for the regional overview? Okay, I thought so.
Thank you so much. And I want to highlight Michelle talking about the 7 minutes. I cannot say enough about it. It's something that a friend and I have implemented. We did it yesterday. She said, I need 5 minutes. It's not an emergency. Nothing's on fire, but I just need 5 minutes to not talk about work. And I said, okay. And we did our 5 minutes and we were like, great, thanks. And her cup felt was refilled, mine was refilled. I didn't even know I needed refilling. So even though it was just like this little snippet of a conversation, it really did do a lot for the both of us. So regarding our region, we provide trainings, training programs, workshops, outreach services, peer groups. We have a resource clearinghouse, a telephone hotline available in English and Spanish. And then, what makes us a little bit different? Um, through other regions that have a focus on peer groups and trainings, we're the only FARSANT recipient that is through a nonprofit. The others are through extensions and colleges. This does give us a little bit of wiggle room, right? An opportunity to create and shape the program in a different way than our colleagues. So, for instance, um, with our FAB training focus that we're doing this year, um, last week I did a training with them, which was five resources to assist you in your community work, and then I did a live presentation and submitted a very simple grant to the attendees, so that way they got to experience what that looked like. We're doing a training on how to properly invoice utilizing templates to make sure that farmers are getting paid in a timely fashion and that they're not getting, gummed up with something like an invoice. So that freedom of being through a nonprofit, it allows us that creativity to grow the program. And just like a day in what we do, day in the life, every day is something different. I think that's what I like best about young farmers. I never have had the same day twice since November. So some days we're doing guidance and support. Some days I'm all about planning. I know you can't see them behind me, but I'm a dry erase girl. So I have dry erase boards behind me for planning. We do a lot of team building, coordinating translators for docs and meetings, providing resources, being an advocate and lending our voices, and then connecting farmers and farm workers to services, accessibility resources all across the Northeast. All right, so now we have time for Q&A if we still have time.
Yes, absolutely. We have more than enough time. And thank you to both of you ladies for providing these insights. And while you were talking, I was thinking about, some of the stressors around being a farmer. And specifically, a lot of the added pressure and stress that we are seeing farmers have to handle on a day-to-day basis. However, when we think about agriculture as a whole, mental health is not one of those topics that is at the top of the list, or that we see a lot of conversation or amplification of what some of those hardships may be. The stressors of climatic changes and financial debt and just, running your farm as a business. I want to get both you and Michelle's thoughts on, in your experience in your respective roles, what are some systemic changes that we need to foster in order to build a culture of mental well-being in the ag community? Because we're not having this conversation enough. So I would just love to get your thoughts on that.
Laura, you can go first if you want. Or
Yeah, sure. Um, I think some of the changes that need to be had in ag culture, in ag communities, and in general around mental health is that stigma. We need to push past that stigma of, just like I said earlier, right? It's really hard to talk about money and mental health, right? Those are things that people tend to keep very close. And I think one of the first major changes is being able to start that conversation. Because until you ask, folks won't know that you need the help, the resource, and outlet, right? Um, and the reframing of, whether it's financial help or mental health help, it is not a handout, it is a hand up. And I think that reframing is very essential to folks starting to get access to the care that they need.
And I'll just add that I think, in addition to stigma, there's also this like, I don't know if I would call it like a lack of self-awareness, but like maybe Laura, you can help me identify it. But I think there's this thing of like, and I am fall victim to this very often where like my mental health is obviously not great or like I'm struggling and I don't actually like acknowledge that I'm struggling, right? And I feel like a lot of folks in my community and farmers alike do the same thing where we're like you kind of just swallow however you're feeling at that moment. I think um and I think this is also like a generational thing. Like I think I am a um late millennial, and so I think like it's very normal for us to like acknowledge that we're like have poor mental health, but it's harder to like actively do something about it. Like I think we acknowledge it sometimes in this very like passive way of like, I'm not doing so great right now, so I'm just going to let myself be sad, as opposed to like actually making changes in our life that could over time decrease our stress or make those stressful chapters of life a little bit less stressful. So hopefully that made sense somehow. But yeah, basically, I think we're like a little reluctant to admit when we need help.
So acknowledging it is one of,
Hmm.
the first step is acknowledging that you need the mental health. And then next, seeking out some of the organizations that you listed and resources that you provided to get the mental help or the support that you need. Now, if we were to switch this and like put ourselves in the position of the farmers, because again, you all work with young farmers on a day-to-day basis, you have insights and knowledge that many folks maybe on the call or in the audience that'll watch it later may not have. And so, what have you learned in terms of what are the barriers that they're saying the farmers, young farmers are saying that they're facing that keep them from wanting to get the mental help or the support that they need? Is it finances? Is it lack of support in the community or feeling like they don't have a village? What are some of the barriers that they have acknowledged that maybe is keeping them from moving forward with getting the help that they need?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely those things that you're mentioning. I think farming is like an sort of an isolated career choice, right? Like it's something that takes a lot of physical space from to do it. Like it takes a lot of physical capital. And so your like proximity to other people is also just lower. And in rural areas, mental health services are just less frequent to find than they are in urban spaces. And so I think that those are definitely barriers. And I also think that, and Laura, you should answer this too, but this is to my point before. I think that a lot of farmers think it's just kind of the way it is
Mm,
for them, right? Like the barrier is also like in your mind. You're like, this is just how farming is. It's isolated. It can be kind of lonely, like, and you just kind of try to weather it in a way that I don't think it's like super helpful. But yeah, I mean, the financial thing is also an issue. But I'll let Laura speak to some of those more tactical.
Sure. So I think it's all those things, right? And then it's also access to care. So, for
mm,
instance, I'm not 100% sure on the stats, but I took a training the other day that said something like only 63% of folks living in rural areas have access to a primary care physician. And I believe less than 50% of folks in rural areas have access to Wi-Fi. Now, if you don't have access to Wi-Fi, you can't call telehealth. You can't reach out to, you know, um, uh, the Trevor Foundation online or disaster distress online and be able to then have like an interactive chat support because you don't have access to that Wi-Fi. So something like access to Wi-Fi then can affect your access to telehealth, to mental health services that are alternate means. because maybe you're too far to drive to a PCP or a mental health provider. If you have Wi-Fi, you can call, right? So part of what we're really trying to do is do a bridging of access to care. And then the financial component. Recently, I don't know if it's gone through, but recently, telehealth was going to be removed as something that was going to be, covered by certain insurances, right? Now, maybe you have your Wi-Fi and your only access is via the telephone. But if that's no longer going to be available, what's the next step, right? What's the next resource? And I think that can be exceptionally hard. And to Michelle's point, I'm Gen X, right? We pushed through it, and you went to bed when you were exhausted, not tired. And that's why I added that line that like you don't earn sleep, you don't earn rest. It's absolutely due to you. It is a requirement of your body to function, and that includes knowing when to turn off your brain a little bit, right? But access to care, finances, stigma, these are all things that keep people from reaching out and getting the resources that they need.
Thank you both. And Laura, I'm so happy that you brought up the subject of healthcare because that is also another area, and that kind of ties into finances. There are plenty of studies and statistics out there that talk about, farmers needing healthcare, but one of the reasons they don't have healthcare is because of the cost that is associated with it when you're not, on another job outside of that. And so that's a huge barrier that needs to be addressed in the ag community. So I'm thankful that you all have these different programs and resources and ability to help farmers. So for those of us that are here on the call, if you have any additional questions for Michelle or Laura, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. But Laura and Michelle, for both of you ladies, and I would like for you all to answer this separately. What are two things that each of you would like to see happen or change in US Ag? And I know that's a loaded question because it's a lot of stuff we would all like to change, especially given where we are right now in US Ag. But your top two things that you would like to see changed.
So I'm newer to ag, so I think what I would like to see for farmers is more stability. So Michelle may have more of an in-depth, wider lens than me with her experience, but I think stability for farmers, right? And it's like you said, if you've ever been on TikTok, there's an entire series of videos about if a farmer goes to the ER, you know it's serious, right? Because the cost, because of the access, right? So I think I'd like to see things become more accessible to folks in ag, whether it's mental health or physical health care, and then to provide some stability and make it less of such a risky business to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I think for me, like, farmer stress is so related to so many other structural issues that farmers face that I feel like I have a long list of things that need to be changed that I think would have a positive impact on farmer mental health in general. But if I had to pick like one thing, it certainly would be the amount of money that actually goes to a farmer from sold produce or like any sort of like value added good or whatever farmers are producing, like fiber. For those of you that are familiar with ag economics, it's just like a very low percentage of money that ends up going to the farmer when things are
Yep.
made. And I think if we just had a better way to actually value farmers, like I find this is not young farmers' perspective, this is my personal opinion, but I just find the food system and the position that we put farmers in from a sociological perspective very like medieval, right? Like we have like the poorest people in our country farming our food, like they make up most and I'm not saying all farmers are poor because that's not true, but I think there is like many family farms that are struggling financially and we treat them almost as this like community of peasants, not in the positive way, that we think about peasant farming, but like in almost in a negative way, if you think about like how the role of a farmer in society has evolved. It's sort of always been this like low tier of a person, which to me is like doesn't make sense. And I feel like teachers are becoming this way too, and nurses even now. And I'm just like, if we could value farmers as like people who are truly a part of the backbone of our national food supply, I think not only would they get more money for their product, which they deserve, but also they would feel more valued. I think farmers, it's easy to feel invisible as a farmer, even though
Hmm.
you have such a strong impact on the food system and on people's lives every day, you still feel so invisible and small because you're not valued in the way that so many other industries are. And so for me, I think that if I had a magic wand, that's I would change everyone's mind and make them understand that like it is our farmers, our teachers, our nurses, our bus drivers, our janitors that like uphold the world in a way that like we invisibilize that I think really can be a detriment to their self-worth. So that's my soapbox
Absolutely.
on that.
No, no, thank you for your insights, both of you all. I'll give mine. I agree with you, Michelle. I think that fair and equitable pricing definitely needs to be at the top of that because finances has a lot to do with farmer stress. That's just what it is, and that's full stop. The second one I think would be, farmers need to be more involved in the decision-making process instead of having laws, legislation passed that we think, and I use that term loosely, um, feel that would benefit the farmer without the farmer's input, as opposed to actually bringing farmers to the table and having discussions and conversations with them. But that also go hand in hand with, having competent folks in positions that they are able to make sure that they're looking at it through the lens of how this is going to affect the farmer, but not only the farmer across the entire food supply chain, because it's not just one variable. It's a very long equation. It starts at the farmer, it ends at the consumer, and everyone that goes along that supply chain also needs to be thinking about the impact or the effects of what happens to farmers. Because again, without the farmers, there is no supply chain. There is no consumer demand. And so I think you're absolutely right, Michelle, that putting farmers at a place that amplifies their position relative to a doctor or a lawyer and the understanding of the importance that they play in this country and our overall health and well-being, because we all want to eat. We like to go to the grocery store and buy food and not have to wait for certain items. But I think as a society, we've gotten so far removed from where our food actually comes from that we don't think about that these are actual people out here that are working day in and day out, to make sure that we eat. So with that, I will say thank you both for this conversation today and taking the time to educate us on the National Young Farmers Coalition, the programs that you have, and the work that you're doing around farmer mental health. And with that, I will check the chat one last time. I don't think we have any additional questions, but thank you to our audience and our guests as well. And everyone have a great afternoon. And if you want to know more about the webinar series and who we'll have coming up next, please feel free to reach out to Patrice or myself, or check us out in our digital magazine or on our social media platforms. Thank you all.
Thanks, y'all. I'll
Thank you
just make
so
a plug
much.
for the
Sure.
folks who are still here. If you want to learn more about young farmers, you can check us out at youngfarmers.org. We have membership, we have actions you can take with our policy work. So many opportunities to engage if you're interested in staying in touch.
Yes, please, please plug into the National Young Farmers Coalition, everybody.
Yes, and feel free to join our email list or get our newsletter, learn about resources we have available, about trainings that are coming up. That all is in the Cultivemos newsletter.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.